I'm Dean Sprague from Melbourne Chefs and talking all things sustainability and food and certainly about crisis. Joining me here today is the dynamic duo of sustainability and food systems and child welfare justice and justice in all cases. So we've got Sabrina and Matthew Carter. Welcome, guys.
Hi.
Hi there. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you for inviting us.
So obviously by the accents, you're originally British and you're back in the UK again.
Yep. We were, as I said, we met Dean in Chiang Mai and through sustainability meetings, and then just started to chat about food security and realize all the links and the passion we had to try and make a difference. So it's great meeting Dean.
Well,
nice to see you again, Dean.
Oh, fantastic to see you guys. So, I mean, obviously the world's in a bit of trouble. Yeah, it doesn't take a genius to work that out. I guess, Matthew, for yourself, like, where do you see the big picture of everything from ecological evaluation right through to people on the grounds, how it's affecting communities? What's the big picture?
So I think I'm actually reading a really interesting book at the moment called Donut Economics by Kate Raworth, I think her name is. And she kind of encapsulates the big picture really well. So on one hand, we're basically exceeding all of the natural earth systems which support us, and basically we're exceeding nearly all of the ecological limits which enable life to go on as it is and supports it. And also, the majority of people in the world aren't actually living by satisfactory social standards either. So both from a social and ecological kind of point of view, we're in trouble, and we've got really big problems looming, like climate change is accelerating faster and more severely than anybody ever expected, and there's some really harsh predictions about biodiversity. So for example, it's predicted that if we carry on the way we're going to lose about 20% of our biodiversity within the next, I think the prediction is about 10 to 20 years. So things aren't looking great, but there seems to be a great deal of awareness coming through, particularly from the younger generations. And through my work, I'm working with a lot of corporations and advertising people. Now they're now really aware of all of this and really concerned by it, and genuinely a lot of them. So there is a lot of hope as well as the big problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I reading this morning that they estimate our topsoil's got about 60 years left in it. Erosion and pollution and so on and so forth. So there's we definitely need to be adding nutrient to soil immediately so that we've got enough soil so that we can grow things, or fast track our knowledge of how to grow things without soil. But it's a biggie. So I guess one of the major factors of any sort of community is the amount of available money. So Sabrina, there's certainly always going to be a runoff from if a family is living in crisis. Some of the options may include selling off their equipment, or selling off their land, or worse things. Unfortunately, there's a huge problem around the globe with child trafficking. So what have you seen?
Yeah, so regarding sort of the food security, especially within the UK and obviously across the world as well with the pandemic, it has really shown up a lot of systemic problems within government, within support, within poverty, and it's really affected families very badly here. Food banks have had to grow exponentially, and there has been funding in the UK for that. A charity that I used to work for, Fair Share, they do a tremendous job redistributing surplus food, as they call it. I mean, the amount of the food waste is astronomical, really. So if we just didn't throw away so much food, we'd be able to feed the world probably twice over, but that's because, you know, a huge problem. But on the ground, you know, there are a lot of charities helping people, and there's a lot of volunteers, and through crisis, it does bring people together. So there is support. People are getting food out here, and supermarkets are helping charities. I haven't had a chance to get back involved with them again this year. As I say, we only just came back to the UK a few months ago, and I've been continuing my job with a human rights charity, Love 146, who work towards ending child trafficking exploitation. And obviously, due to the pandemic, it has probably made children more vulnerable through to poverty, desperation, and therefore they're more exposed to trafficking because they're vulnerable anyway. And this is from Southeast Asia to even, you know, across Australia. Every young person can be more vulnerable. And as families get poorer, they're looking for more ways to feed their families and earn more money. And traffickers promise people, you know, children a better life. They sell them this dream, but unfortunately, that isn't what it is. And my charity deals with like prevention education and survivor care, main areas. So as you know, educating, this is through food security, works the same, getting people to understand the systems, why things are like they are, not just solving the problem, but what the cause of the problem is. I think that's really important in many areas, because all these areas are quite linked when you look at it. What's it called? Systems thinking?
Yeah, you can use systems thinking to look at it. And the interesting thing that Sabrina's touched upon with the problem's food availability. So there's no food shortage in the world, because 40% of the food that's ever produced is never eaten. But the big agenda is to produce, because the production of food is primarily an economic concern. So there's always this big push to produce more and more and more food, which subsequently a lot of it never gets eaten. And the population agenda is also being used to push this forward as well, saying, well, we're going to have 9 billion people soon, so we need to produce more food, but we don't. I mean, you've got, you know, obesity is a massive problem in the developed world, and then there's people starving, but then there's, you know, nearly half the food that's produced is thrown away. Yet the agenda of climate change is being used to say we need biotechnology, we need to bioengineer food so we can produce more. And, you know, and then that feeds into things like biodiversity, because we're just taking up more and more land. And as Sabrina was saying, if we address the problem of food availability more, rather than food production, we could solve a lot of these problems.
Yeah, well, one thing I constantly think about is, yes, we do grow a lot of food, but there's you know, people who are starving, and you can compare the stats of the amount of food that's being wasted in relation to people that are going without food. For me, I think there's definitely a logistics issue, and in this day and age of where you can jump on an app, order something, have it arrive at your door the next day. We do have a logistics system in place. We're just not utilising. So that collectiveness of working together and using different systems, we can work with those tools today.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think the community aspect. Sorry, Dean.
What do you?
Yeah, I was saying the community. You're right with the community aspects, bringing people together.
I'm curious about what's happening in the UK, and probably, you know, if you're in a position to talk about it, Europe by default as well. What are you seeing at grassroots level happening in communities in the UK? I mean, apart from, yes, there's less and less work, unemployment, education is an issue, but what are people beginning to do about it? What are some groups that you've...
Yeah, well, I mean, saying, you know, looking at communities on a food level and how they're struggling, I mean, that was happening anyway before the pandemic. I think it's highlighted in the public's eyes, as in there's more campaigning. We've had, for example, people that have a platform, celebrities, have made it more aware to the public that this is a problem with child hunger, with holiday hunger, with celebrities campaigning for that. And there's been a lot of more awareness around that. I think people, even though they're struggling, they do want to help. You know, working in the charity sector, it's a difficult time for everybody, because we're obviously, anyone that charity support are people that are dependent and they need help. They're vulnerable people. But people are also trying to look after their own families and feed their own families. So, you know, only being back for a few months, we've been dropped into a situation, as you know, is very different than Thailand. They've dealt with the pandemic very differently anyway. But as you know, in Thailand, people are still queuing up for food parcels. So it's not that dissimilar here. You just see it in a different way. You know, it's not on the street so much over here, but people are positive about helping each other out and pulling together as communities, and I think that is happening quite a lot here. You know, there's a lot of galvanized action to say maybe address what the problems are, and this is an opportunity when people are going through crisis to highlight these issues and for emerging, for example, startups, people to think differently and more diversely about their business and how it should run, especially in the food industry. As you say, with production, how things are distributed, all those are really important, but they all link up together. And all this is, you know, needs to, is for, you know, the help to help communities, really, when it comes down to it, not about companies making lots of money. It needs to be about us all working together on more of a level playing field. I mean, that's probably quite a big, big ask, but but you know, it's I do see some positives, and I think we do need to stay positive, even though there is a lot of heartache and distress and people struggling. But there's also a lot of people doing great things out there to give people better lives. You know, Matt and I work in different areas like that, but working towards the same kind of goal, is to just, you know, to make the world a better place in all sorts of areas. But it's an ongoing job. But you know, the food security is something that we're both passionate about. Also, I know that food brings communities together. For example, the vulnerable traffic survivors that I deal with, food is a big thing for them. It was a big thing from the countries that they've come from as well. They don't have any family. It's still a very key factor in their lives. So food means a lot to many different peoples in different ways, but it definitely brings people together. So it's important that we make sure people have enough of it, really, as well.
And if you address some of the problems in, sorry.
No, I was
just going to say.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, if you address some of the problems within the food systems, you could also impact climate change and biodiversity and all a wealth of other environmental and social problems. So I just wanted to tack that on the end of what Sabrina was saying.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking exactly the same thing. It's such a critical factor. I mean, a scarcity of food leaves a person vulnerable and in a position of fear. So, and that has a resounding effect outwards from their own mental well-being to their immediate friends and family and community by default as well. So yeah, I mean, we're certainly facing some we really need to think about the systems and use what's best from the existing systems. There's no point reinventing the wheel. Taking the best from those systems and really using applied thought to at least get a band-aid solution out there for some of the major crisis regions. I guess going back to yourself, Matthew, what can we do over the next 5 to 10 years to I guess raise the awareness or take action?
Well, I think people need to be the key point is that people need to be aware that there's enough food in the world. I think that's the that's my bit. So I've already mentioned this, but that's my big kind of bugbear with the whole thing, that there's such a strong emphasis on producing more and more and more, and maybe we need to think about decoupling food from the economic system, or at least the essential food, because it's things like unequal trade relationships. A lot of it's to do with trade. So, for example, when you had the big famines in Ethiopia in the 80s and millions of people were starving, they were exporting food and importing aid. I mean, it's just the way the whole system of having food as a commodity. The primary purpose of food production is not to feed people, and I think that's a really big key to the issue. And then we also need kind of the right infrastructure in a lot of countries, because that's the reason why lots of food is wasted, because it's grown but then never gets to market. So it's a hugely complex thing, but I think there has to be a massive awareness of food isn't currently produced with the primary purpose of feeding people. Would be my takeaway message.
That's as you're speaking there, I'm thinking about the possibilities of, if you remove that economics from food items as a commodity, food companies can exist potentially. I mean, you can call me a dreamer, but what if the government was actually offering tax incentives or break or whatever to those companies that are actually putting forward their product and their skills to feed people in crisis? So, I mean, a huge company look, I shouldn't really mention companies, but there's some large food companies out in the world who could potentially, even if it's 1%, 2%, 5%, 10% of whatever they produce, just given out into the community, especially those more vulnerable communities, whether it's in the UK, Australia, Africa. Just to offer a bit of a segue through, over the last couple of months, there's been a locust plague through southern India and extending all the way up through the border, Pakistan and into Afghanistan. Now, a lot of the locusts are actually eating food crop, naturally, but also grain crop for livestock. Are you guys aware of that at all? Has any of that been in the mainstream media?
Not a thing that's been. I think India's in trouble in lots of ways at the moment. Coronavirus,
yes.
And there's been nothing. And our news is dominated by, because the UK is not doing particularly well with coronavirus, so it's dominated by that, and then kind of Brexit, and then it's just, that's all you hear in the news at the moment.
Which I think is like, when I first started to learn about it, I knew that in the coming months there's going to be a massive crisis, food crisis throughout that subcontinent, and it sort of seems like no one is really discussing this or raising the awareness of it. So, I think about ways that we can grow food now to be of use into the future, whether it's small nutrient-dense sprouts or vegetables, leafy greens, that sort of thing. But there's one that's potentially just around the corner, which will equal, and if not be much worse than the African famines of the 80s. They were compounded by wars, but there's certainly a lot of political strife in that region as well, which could really escalate and exacerbate that issue. It's not all doom and gloom, though. It's not all doom and gloom. So we're about to, it comes from those little actions that we take, and it's not necessarily about offering a thumbs up on a social channel. Sometimes it's asking the hard questions, and I consider you two to be very much at the epicenter of looking at the panorama of issues and how they relate to each other. So I guess over the last 12 months, Sabrina, what issue has arisen within yourself or that you've observed that is alarming? moving back into doom and gloom.
How long have you got?
Yeah, good.
But what I mean, we've been moving around quite a bit through Thailand as well, and through everything that's been happening. I think the alarming thing is, and also probably comforting in some ways, that actually we're not that different. The fact that everyone's in crisis, but we're also human, we're all actually very similar. Actually, therefore, we should support each other more and be more of a global community, and not be, as we all seem to be going, especially the UK, is being our little island on our own. I think that's not the way to do things in any respect. Collaborating, it gives you a bigger voice. In any area you work in, I find that is more powerful, and also encourages each other, gives each other hope, and you can fight that fight much harder by just bringing everybody together. And that's with food security, education, so people can understand what they can do. As you said, it's not the little things that you do. It doesn't, because this can be overwhelming for some people. Think, oh, well, it's big companies, it's about big systems, and we can't do anything about that, so we're just not going to do anything. And that's kind of, because it's quite a big, scary thing to talk about. But we can still do small things, and they do matter. And if we all do those small things together, then you have that voice to make a change, to go to your local council, to petition, to change policy in government. It does take a long time and it's hard work, but it's got to be worth it, And I think the more we talk to each other about problems we're having, issues we're having, about anything, things that we want to make a difference about. We still, regarding the way we eat and buy produce, buying locally. Also, Matt and I ran an organic food business together, so we understand it from that level as well. We were delivering produce to a wide variant area, but wealth-wise as well. So understanding that doing those good things and buying locally or buying organically doesn't have to be expensive. These things don't have to be expensive to make a difference. And that's why communities need to talk about these things more, to realise that, oh, right, okay, so I can do that on my budget, because it is about money as well. Working with the food waste charity, working with people, with volunteers that have come from all sorts of backgrounds, and then enable them to be employed afterwards as well. So that working with food waste charity was actually a great part of the circular economy within food and employment as well. And I think by working together as a community means more now than ever. I think it's something that we need to really, really work on, is talking to each other more and being friends more across the world, because all these things are related together. We're not just what goes on, say, in Thailand, in Southeast Asia, doesn't happen over here. There are similarities, and we need to be sharing that, like what you're doing today, Dean, talking to different people and getting their ideas from where they come from, their experience, their background, and what they've seen. It can all feed into this one big picture and this one big movement to make change. So collaboration within communities is always my big thing for me, and we always need to improve on that.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I think I'd like to thank you for your time. You've certainly given us a lot to think about, and some potential solutions in there as well. I think the biggest takeaway, of course, is beginning to trust ourselves, to trust others, and say hello to your neighbour. If you're growing carrots, share your carrots.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, thanks, Dean. It's been really great talking to you.
Great way to
Thanks
make
so
friends.
much, Dean, for asking us.
No, thank you both for your time.
Yes.
And you take care of yourself, and all the best for coming Christmas. And let's hope that 2021 brings some bright, shiny news.
Yeah, absolutely.
To you too. Cheers.
Okay, cheers, Dean.
Don't
Bye.
stop doing what you're doing. You take care.